Yeah, that's awesome. So we're about to go live, and so you can just hang tight, Brian.
I
And
just wanted to I just wanted to note that I need to open the trust meeting before you guys get going too fast.
perfect,
Um, on
perfect.
I think it was slide 2 you have. Um, I'll need to announce each of the anticipated speakers. If you could, I just don't
Yes.
I don't have a list, so if you could show me that slide again, I'll take a quick picture of it
Yep.
so I can just
Yep. It's right
identify for
here.
the record, and then I can do that in my bit.
Perfect. Okay, good. So I want to go live, but Brian, just so you know, I don't know if you heard me this a minute ago. I'm going to just have everybody go on mute and turn their videos off for the 1 minutes to let people sign in, and they can go ahead and answer the question on the first slide, and then we'll start about 5 after.
Amazing. I'm holding my 3-month-old baby, so the more non-screen time I have, the better.
Okay, good. So did you get that screenshot?
I've got what I needed. Thank you. I
All
don't
right.
see Barry's name listed on there.
Barry's not going to be a presenter. He's going to be behind the scenes.
Awesome. Thank you, Barry.
All right, thanks. So I'm going to go ahead and go live so everyone can go on mute and turn their screens off, their videos rather. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for being here. We've got a great turnout here. We're going to get started. I think, Brian, did you kick us off here?
Thank you, Jen. This is, let's see, let me open my, as a preliminary matter, this is Brian Sullivan, the chair of the Affordable Housing Trust. Permit me to confirm all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Brooke Moore,
I'm here.
Penny Dye, Christy Ferrantella,
Here.
Dave Iverson, Allison Mitchell,
Here.
Rima Sherry.
Here.
Okay. Eleanor, we did not hear, is Eleanor Antonetti? I'm not hearing Eleanor. Tucker Holland.
Present.
And Ken Bogrand.
Present.
Okay, thank you, Ken. Tucker, are we able to proceed without Eleanor at the moment, or? We are recording. Oh, there she is.
You can proceed with, I'm going to have to step out. I have a doctor's appointment. I couldn't change. I'm sorry, but I am going to leave this running so I have a recording of it.
Excellent, thank you. Today's presenters, we have intended speakers, Jen Goldson. Can you hear me, Jen?
Hi, how are you? Yes, perfect.
And Tyler Marin.
Hello, I'm here.
Great. This is an open meeting of the Nantucket Affordable Housing Trust, and it's being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of COVID-19 virus, we've been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement for the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. In the order, which you can find posted with the agenda and the materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment to those members of the public who have joined via Zoom. For this meeting, the Nantucket Affordable Housing Trust is convening by video conference via the Zoom app as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Please note the meeting is being recorded and that all attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you, and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything you may broadcast may be captured in the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided the members of this body are available on the website unless otherwise noted, and the public is encouraged to following along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. We'll turn to the first item on the agenda, and before we do so, permit me to cover ground rules for an effective and clear conduct of our business to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I, the chair, will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Please remember to mute your phone or your computer when you are not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly in a way that helps identify and generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait for the chair to yield the floor to you. State your name before speaking. If the members wish to engage in a conversation with other members, please do so through the chair, caring to identify yourself. After the members have spoken, the chair will afford the public comment as follows. After the members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment to the members of the public that have joined the meeting via Zoom. Members of the public who wish to speak must state their name and be acknowledged to speak to the chair. Finally, each vote in this meeting will be conducted by a roll call. If I may have a motion to convene. I can't see everyone's face, so if somebody on the board can speak up.
So moved, Rima.
Okay, and if Rima has moved, can I have a second?
Second by Christie.
Great, thank you, Christy. By roll, Brooke Moore,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Rima Sherry,
Aye.
Allison Mitchell.
Aye.
I don't think we have Dave Iverson yet. Okay, and I myself, Brian Sullivan. So I will introduce the panel. As item number 2 on the agenda, we have Tucker Holland, the Municipal Housing Director for the Town of Nantucket. Jen Goldson, she's the Housing Production Consultant for the town. Judy Barrett, an additional housing consultant for the town. Tyler Marin, and members of the trust. I'm going to turn the meeting over to Jen for her presentation. And Jen, if you have any comments or rules on how you'd like the things to move forward other than what I've described, please start with us.
Perfect. I will. Thanks everyone for being here. I'm Jen Goldson. I'm a consultant. Since this is a webinar format rather than a Zoom meeting, there's a few differences than you may be used to. And so why don't I actually skip to those right now and we'll go over that, and then I'm going to come back to some of the earlier slides. So there's really 4 main ways you can participate today. One is through some polling that we're going to be doing in a few minutes. It's going to ask you questions on the screen and you can answer and it'll show us the results live. The second is we have discussion questions at the end of the presentation that you can, they're really just prompts that you can answer through either the Q&A function on the webinar or through the chat function on the webinar. Either way is fine. The other thing you should know is that there's a Q&A function that's available to you at any time. If you have a question that you want to basically document the answer for, the way the Zoom Q&A works, some of you probably already know this, is that it will submit the question to us in written format, you'll submit it, and then we'll either answer it by typing out our answer to you and sending it back to you, or we'll answer it live. So that's a good way to ask specific questions that you want to kind of document your answer. Then there's the chat function, which you can also use at any time through our presentation or after we're done with the presentation. And the chat function is really meant to offer your opinions and your thoughts and answer questions. But we've got lots of eyes on this tonight. So if you do happen to put a question that you want answered into the chat, we're also looking for those. So don't feel like if you put a question into the chat, just because I said you should put questions in the Q&A, don't feel like we won't answer it. We're going to try to get to those questions too. The only caveat is with a lot of attendees, sometimes we miss things in the chat because it kind of just goes up and up and up as people are commenting, and we do our best to catch it all. So I just caution you that if you really want a question answered live or in writing, to put it in the Q&A, but we'll do our best to get to all of the questions in the chat as well. Those are the main things. Brian did say that you'd have a chance to also speak. So what I can do at the end, if anybody does want to speak, there's a way that you can indicate that you want to speak. I think you need to raise your hand, and or you can put in the chat. If that doesn't work for you, if you don't see a raise hand function, you can put in the chat that I want to speak at the end of the meeting, and I can then allow you to talk. Because this is not a typical Zoom meeting where you can just unmute yourself. You just have to let us know if you do want to say anything towards the end of the meeting. We'll give you some time for that. I think that's everything. The other thing you should know, just going over some logistics here, is that even though when you write in tonight, either the Q&A or the chat, only the panelists can see it. And the panelists are the consultant team, town staff, and the trust board members. even though only we can see your comments right now, I want you to know that they will be part of the written record of this meeting, and we'll have a transcript of all of the written comments that come in. So, so I just wanted you to know that anything you write tonight, we'll get it. Also, it will be part of the written transcript of the meeting. I think those are all the logistics. Brian, did you want me to say anything else, or do you think I missed anything? Okay, well, if I did, just chime in. Okay, I think that was a thumbs up for me. All right, good. So, so we have a relatively short presentation, but what I want to say is that this is a complicated topic, and we do our best to give you as much of the context of what this project is about as we feel is appropriate for a meeting of this type. But we also want to be careful not to monopolize the whole meeting with lots of facts and figures and information, which takes away from your chance to contribute. So tonight we're really trying to find a balance of providing you with information, but also giving you amp to interact with these different functions that I talked about a moment ago, as well as give us your comments and thoughts. So that being said, we also are very happy to take questions in the presentation, and we would gladly stop for questions, especially if there are things that are coming in, and our helpers behind the scenes here will let Tyler and I know while we're presenting if there's something pertinent to something that we're just presenting currently. We can pause and certainly take questions, especially if it's regarding clarifying something that we just said, or questioning the accuracy of something we just said, or just wanting more details. If you're talking and you feel like, gosh, I wish they would tell more about that, just put it in the Q&A or even the chat, and we can pause the presentation and try to address those questions. So we're going to talk, I'm going to talk a little bit, just some opening slides around sort of the heart of this effort and what the main question is we're trying to answer when we do these types of housing plans. And then Tyler from Barrett Planning Group will really go over the details of the project and the purpose and what a housing production plan is and what 40B is, and give you lots of basics around affordable housing and things like that. And then we'll end with some engagement that's coming up that you can participate in addition to the engagement that we're doing tonight and the schedule going forward over the next few months. And really throughout, even though the last bullet says polling and discussion questions, in a little bit, I'm actually going to do some polling as part of this presentation. And then we will have a few discussion questions at the end. So that's the general format. So the question at the heart of this effort, in my practice, I do a lot of work with communities trying to create housing and kind of grapple with housing needs in their community. And I know from the work that I do that it's a real struggle to try to figure out, well, how do we integrate the housing options that we know we need and we know can serve our population, but do that at the same time that we're also protecting our resources. And and that would include natural and built resources that really contribute to what makes Nantucket authentic and sustainable. And we know that these answers are not easy. So I don't have to say this as a way to sound like I'm oversimplifying, but really that's the question at the heart of any kind of planning effort where you're really trying to balance these, people could see them as really competing things, right? We want to create housing options, but we also want to preserve and protect the things that we love about our community and the things that we know make the community special and sustainable. And so that's what we get back to, as we're going through this process, and you're going to start to see some of the details of what's entailed in this kind of process. But I just want to start out with that overall framing of the trick of these plans, or the beauty of these plans, is working with the community to try to figure out, well, what is that right balance for this community? And I use that word balance because I do think it's a balance. I don't think it's an easy, yes or no, black and white sort of solutions. I think it's really finding the best balance for each community that we work with, and it will be a different balance for each community. And so the plans that we help communities create are highly customized because of this, our belief that it's about finding that unique balance for your community. And this is really where you come in. So the other thing I just want to say at the top of this meeting is that as a consultant, we don't have all the answers for you, but what we do throughout the process is try to figure out where is that balance based on what you care about and what the community tells us are the things that really contribute to that essence of your community. And so that's why the engagement process is so important. And you'll see as we go through this that we're really just at the very beginning of this housing plan work. And the reason we wanted to hold this webinar right in the very beginning of the work is to start to get your feedback right away on what are the things you care about, what are the issues that you see on Nantucket, and what are the opportunities you see on Nantucket as we start to dig in to this plan. So that's a little bit of the overview. And I just went over this. We're going to do these different types of engagement just today. And your comments will come in and they will be part of the public record. So let's just dive right into this polling. So the first question, I'm going to launch the poll. You should be able to see that on your screen now. If you can't, write in the chat, that you're having trouble, and we'll try to troubleshoot with you. But if you can see it, you can go ahead and answer it. And so you can pick multiple answers to these questions. And there are 2 questions. You'll want to scroll down to see both of them. So, and then it won't submit your answer until at the end you hit submit. So the first question is, what is your affiliation with Nantucket? And you can say you're a full-time resident, part-time resident, business owner, property owner, but not my residence, meaning like maybe you own your residence too, but you also own other property. Work here, but don't live here, and then none of the above. And again, you can pick multiple answers. And then if you scroll down after you do that, the second question is, which viewpoints do you most relate with? And we just picked a few that are kind of common from our work. These are things that we hear. And you can pick multiple things. You may even pick all of them. You may feel like I have all of these viewpoints, and that's realistic as well. So I want minimal change on the island. I want to promote more housing options. I'm concerned about losing open space or natural resources. I'm not sure if that's also cut off on your screen. I want to be a more welcoming place to a more diverse population. I'm concerned about losing the historic and charm of the island. I want to, sorry, there's a typo there. I want to better support seniors on the island, and I'm concerned about increasing traffic congestion. I want to have more affordable housing options. I'm concerned about large developments on the island. And then the last choice is I want to have more options for people who work here to live here. So hopefully we captured some of the, the different viewpoints and the complicated viewpoints as well. And I'm just watching the numbers go up here. So we have about 49 participants on with us now, and I'm seeing about 36 votes so far. So my folks behind the scenes, just let me know, because I'm not watching the chat right now. If people are having any trouble, if you could try to assist them, that would be helpful. And if for some reason this just is not working for you, you can always email your answers to me directly at jennifer@jmgoldson.com. And actually, Barry, if you put my email in the chat for folks, if anybody's having trouble or for any reason, would prefer to email me their answers, that's fine too, as an alternative way of doing it. Okay, so I have people, it looks like people are still voting, but we're almost there. Remember, you need to choose your answers for both questions and then hit submit at the end to get your answer recorded. All right, great. So we have about 90% of the people on the call have voted so far. So I'm going to go ahead and end this. If for any reason you didn't get a chance, you can email me, or you can also just put it in the chat, which may be easier for you than emailing me. So whatever is easiest for you. All right, great. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. And then I'm going to be able to share these results with you right away. And so 72% here chose a full-time resident, And then we have 22% part-time resident. Looks like no business owners. A few people, 5 people, which is about 11%, said property that you own property that's not your residence. And then nobody who works here but don't live here is on the call or on the webinar. And a couple people said none of the above. So for the couple people that said none of the above, if you could just put in the chat, like, what is your affiliation? Just, for sake of curiosity. All right. And then which viewpoints do you most relate with? So let me see if I can do this in order of the highest responses. Okay, so the highest response here was the bottom one, which is I want to have more options for people who work here to live here. And that was 63% chose that. And then we have 61% said I want to have more housing options. 50% I want to be a more welcoming place for a more diverse population. And I didn't quite go in order, but 52% say I want to promote more housing options. And then we had some lower responses, but certainly people still care about, I'm concerned about large developments on the island, traffic congestion. I want to better support seniors on the island, and concerned about losing historic charm of the island and losing open space, and want minimal change was one of the lower answers at 11%. Okay, great, that's helpful for us to see. And when we write up the results of this webinar, so don't worry, I'm about to stop the share, but this will all be part of the record. So you'll be able to have the results of this polling. All right, great. So let me just close this. So we have the next polling question here, which is about your age. And it's interesting for us to see the kind of the makeup of who's here. And we're not going to ask you a ton of demographic questions, but this is just one key question that we're always curious about. And so go ahead and answer. People are zooming up their answers right now, so you're already used to doing this. And so far we have no one under 25, but every other category people are choosing. I have the benefit of seeing it live as you're doing it, but in a moment I'll also share this with you. Yeah, so far we're seeing a little bit of an older population, which makes sense for an event like this. All right, I have about 88% of people voting. If anybody else wants to vote, go ahead. If not, it looks like the numbers are not moving up right now. If you're having trouble, you can put it in the chat, email me, and I'm going to go ahead and end this poll. And I'm going to share the results. So most people, about 29% said the 55 to 64 category, and then 22% 65 to 74, and it looks like 18% 35 to 44. So you can see those results there. Not a lot of young people, but that also makes sense given the demographics of the island. Great. All right, so I have one more question here for you for polling. Okay, so the last question is just about housing tenure. So hopefully we got the categories here right, but there is another choice. So the question is, do you currently own your primary residence on Nantucket, rent your primary residence on Nantucket year-round, live with family, rent your residence in the off-season, meaning you live somewhere else in the summer, or I do not live on Nantucket as my primary residence. And then there's an other category, just in case I didn't capture all the living situations of folks who are participating here tonight. And you'll see if some of you may have taken the survey. Actually, no one took the survey because we were just launching it today. We're going to talk about that a little bit, but you'll see this is a similar question in the survey. It's nice to be able to compare between different engagement methods to, sort of who was at each one. So we have about 75%, almost 80% of people voting now. Great. And so far what I'm seeing is that most of you own your primary residence on Nantucket, but we've got a couple that are saying year-round rental. A couple people live with family, and a few people do not live on the island. All right, so I've got 84% voting, and it looks like the numbers have slowed down. So go ahead and put your vote in if you're trying to. All right, good. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. And then I'm going to share the results with you. And so you can see 67% of you own your primary residence on Nantucket, 9%, which is 4 participants, rent your primary residence year round, 4% live with family. We don't have anybody on this call or webinar, I should stop saying call, who rents your residence in the off season with a different unit in the summer. And then we have about 9 people, 20%, who do not live on Nantucket. All right, great. Excellent. All right, so we're going to go ahead and Tyler, why don't you take over now? And I'm going to go ahead and put myself on mute.
All right. Thanks, Jen. Hi, everybody. My name is Tyler Marin. I'm with Barrett Planning Group. We, like Jen, are consultants working with the town on this project, this housing production plan. So essentially today I'm going to go over just the basics of the project, what a housing production plan is, why we do it, go in a little bit to the structure of it, and give some background on the issue of affordable housing. So the first thing I want to do is clarify what we mean when we talk about affordable housing. That is a term that means kind of a lot of things to a lot of people, even, depending on your location. It means something very different on Nantucket than it might, in Boston or some other city or town. So when we talk about affordable housing in the context of state law, especially Chapter 40B, you'll hear a lot about that in this presentation. That has a very specific definition, and that is housing that is deed restricted to serve households at or below 80% of the area median income, which is calculated by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Nantucket is it's unique in many ways, but it's somewhat unique in this sense, in that there sort of is no area. The surrounding area of Nantucket is the ocean. So when we talk about AMI for Nantucket, it is just the town and county of Nantucket. So it's sort of, the measurement is a bit different than it is elsewhere in Massachusetts. But that's what I've put in this table down here. So these are the income thresholds for being considered affordable under Chapter 40B, depending on the size of the household. So for example, for a 3-person household on Nantucket, for something to count as affordable, it would have to be restricted to be affordable for that family of 3 making $72,150 annually. So that's how to read that chart. So that's sort of what we're talking about when we talk about affordable housing. This plan doesn't just address this definition. On Nantucket, affordable could mean, right at that area median income or above. So the plan does go into addressing all levels of Nantucket's need, but capital A affordable housing versus lowercase a is one way you could think of it. That official definition is that 80% of area median income, or in Nantucket's case, the town's median income. So next slide. Thank you. So I mentioned it before, what is Chapter 40B? So that is the main piece of legislation that we're going to talk about when we talk about affordable housing in Massachusetts. Essentially, it requires that every city and town in the state have at least 10% of their total year-round housing stock. It's important, especially out on Nantucket and on the Cape and other areas like that, to specify, year-round. So, occupied year-round housing units, at least 10% of those should be affordable under the definition we just discussed. And so the state keeps a ongoing list called the Subsidized Housing Inventory, SHI, of all of the units in each town that qualify under their definition of affordable. And, they track who's at or above 10%. Most communities in Massachusetts have not yet met that 10%. Nantucket is hardly alone in that. But that is the goal that the state would like every community to push towards. I've put a little table down here. The most recent counts, this is what Nantucket's SHI looks like this month, January 2021, has 199 units on there. So about 4% of the total. So in order to meet that 10% threshold, the town would have to more than double its current number of units on the SHI. And again, there may very well be units that are, affordable to to households at that appropriate income level, but aren't deed restricted, or, there could be deed restricted units at 100 or 120% of that median income that meet very important housing needs on the island, but because they're not at that 80% level, they don't count towards this particular list. So so essentially the consequences of being underneath that 10% in Chapter 40B. So it not only gives the towns a goal to strive for in terms of their affordable housing production, it also contains some mechanisms by which the towns can be, encouraged to meet that. So that bullet point number 2 says that it's often referred to as the comprehensive permit law. Comprehensive permit being a special type of application that a developer may make before a town zoning board if they do not meet that 10% threshold under 40B. And the idea behind that is essentially to streamline the permitting process for developments that provide affordable housing. So it's one single application, one single hearing, as opposed to the myriad of different permits that may be required under local zoning. It can bypass certain local zoning restrictions, and there's an expedited time limit on that. So essentially the idea is, if you aren't at that threshold, then it's easier for people to come in and build more affordable housing in the community, the idea being that you'll get to that 10% faster. So that's the long and short of it for Chapter 40B. And I saw a partial chat window pop up asking about census numbers, which is a good point. The official year-round unit count is only updated with an actual US Census. It doesn't use estimates or anything. So right now it's still going off 2010 numbers. It's not clear when the 2020 numbers will come out. This is sort of an odd year for the census, as it is for a lot of us. So that threshold will change at some point in the future, but that's what it is right now. So this is where a housing production plan comes in. So this is a state recognized plan. Once we finish writing it and the town approves it, it gets sent out to the state for approval. And it is essentially, it's got two primary purposes, I would say. One is to work specifically towards that 10% statutory minimum under Chapter 40B. How are you going to produce that very specific number of units that you need to reach? And the other is just more broadly address the housing needs. I mentioned it a few minutes ago, that this plan will consider sort of the full picture of Nantucket's housing needs, even if they don't all fit under that definition. So that's essentially how it functions. I'll get more into the different components of it a little bit later, but that's broadly speaking what it does. So next slide. So why is this plan important? Why has the town bothered to spend time and money to bring us on board to write a new one? That is because it's, housing is a, real serious need in this community, as it is in many others. And, having a long-term plan, an HPP is meant to last for about 5 years, is just good to have, good to reference, good to have a roadmap for meeting those important goals. But then there's also implications under Chapter 40B. And that is if a town both has an accepted housing production plan, or a HPP, I'll refer to it as both throughout, and then can demonstrate that annually it's producing a certain number of affordable units to add to the subsidized housing inventory. That is 0.5% of the total number of year-round units annually. So in Nantucket's case, that's about 24 annually. So essentially the idea is you've got an approved plan that shows that you have a roadmap for getting to that 10%. You're demonstrating, some consistent progress towards it. So then if you prove those two things, then the local zoning board has more flexibility to impose conditions, or even in some cases, outright deny a comprehensive permit application. Basically, the town gets a little bit of flexibility and control in terms of its affordable housing production back when it demonstrates that it's making active strides in that direction. So next slide. Okay, so before I get into more specifics of the plan, I just want to go over briefly some of the major housing players on the island, organizations, entities that have already, been working on housing issues for many years. This is sort of the existing capacity to sort of carry out any recommendations we might make in our plan. So I'll just run down these quickly. So first of all, the town is always an extremely important partner. The Affordable Housing Trust, we are currently at a meeting of the Affordable Housing Trust, but in addition to, working with consultants to create housing production plans, they do a wide variety of activities, financing, development, direct assistance, advocacy, all sorts of things a housing trust can do. The Municipal Housing Office works with them as well. We have Tucker Holland, who does a great job. And then the next entity is the Nantucket Housing Authority. Under state law, a housing authority can be established to develop and manage lower income rental housing, although the Nantucket Housing Authority has also had a hand in homeownership projects. For example, with working with the next entity on the list, the Housing Assistance Corporation of Cape Cod, several years back, they came in to act as the developer for the Sachem's Path development. Probably people in town may be familiar with that. Essentially, the Housing Authority, had the land and brought in the Housing Assistance Corp to develop. So even though it's not a Nantucket-based organization, they can still, hop over on a ferry and come help out over here. Housing Nantucket is a private nonprofit group. They create and manage affordable housing, both rental and homeownership. They administer the Housing Covenant Program, which is a homeownership program. And they work with a lot of the other entities on this list. They seem very active. Habitat for Humanity is a name that might be familiar to a lot of you. That's a national organization that basically specializes in the creation of housing, homeownership opportunities for low-income families in particular. They're working in a ton of communities. The Nantucket Education Trust. So we're getting into a few organizations that housing may not be their primary focus, but they still have engaged in housing production activity on the island. So the Nantucket Education Trust helped develop Cow Pond Lane, which was 12 units of housing primarily meant for teachers and staff, but it ended up other community members were able to take advantage of that as well. Remain Nantucket is another private philanthropic organization. Again, housing is not the only thing, far from the only thing they work on, but their focus is on helping year-round Nantucket residents, and that includes housing, being able to keep staying on the island year-round. They've helped fund, for example, some of Housing Nantucket's activities in the past. And then there's also various employers who have created employee housing. In a seasonal market like Nantucket, that workforce housing for folks who need to come to the island to work during the summer is always a big question. And there have been several employers on the island that have created bedrooms and units for their employees, such as Nantucket Island Resorts or Nantucket Cottage Hospital. So those are just some examples of, I think those are most of the major housing entities. I'm sure there are others, like I'm pretty sure the police department maintains a few units for its employees. So there's a lot going on in terms of creating, maintaining, managing housing and affordable housing on the island. So our HPP plan will definitely take into account the rich resources that already exist on the island for doing this kind of work. So next slide. Excuse me. So Now we're going to get into some of the actual contents of the HPP. As I believe Jen mentioned, we're still at the very early stages. This thing has not been written yet. We're still gathering your feedback for writing it, but I'm going to share, what sections and topics typically belong in an HPP. Some of these are mandated by the state. Some of them are just, best practice that we found when writing these. And give some just very preliminary observations about the types of things we might be including in Nantucket's plan based on our past experience working here and in other communities with some similar issues, as well as the preliminary analysis of the data we've done so far. So the first section I'm going to talk about are development constraints. So whenever I talk about this section, I just want to stress that the way it's worded, the word constraint is not meant to be like a negative value judgment. It can kind of sound like that sometimes, but like if you look at the kinds of things we list as potential development constraints, we talk about, water resources or, rare species habitats, and these are good things. These are community resources that we want to, preserve and appreciate, but they are constraints because they, control where new housing development might occur. So that's all that is. This would be a very bad plan if we said to get rid of all the rare species habitats. I don't think the town would be happy to pay for a plan like that. So rest assured, that's not what we're doing. Nantucket has a ton of amazing natural resources, and we're going to go into a much more detailed analysis of them in the actual plan. But there's also regulatory constraints, like what is legally allowed through zoning and other land use policy. So if we go to the next slide, I will elaborate on that a bit. So here's some potential challenges that might come up during the barriers and constraints section, and just generally issues that we need to be aware of when we're proposing strategies for Nantucket. The first one, I sort of touched on this when I talked about area median income, but Nantucket's is high, partially because it's just looking at Nantucket, no surrounding communities. So the range of incomes that need, help meeting their housing needs is greater. In some communities, the Chapter 40B, 80% of AMI is most of the issue. That's adequate to really focus in on that. But, in Nantucket's zoning regulations, as well as in the missions of some of the nonprofit entities I talked about, they're looking at helping what is typically referred to as moderate income households all the way up to 150% of area median income. So there's a much wider array of income needs than in some communities that we need to address. And so that is a challenge we have to be aware of. And then not just differing income levels, but the seasonal market is so huge in these, sort of tourism-centered economies. On the Cape, it's similar to, not only do we have to keep housing affordable, but worrying about losing year-round housing to the seasonal market is always something you have to keep in mind. Then there's what's allowed under regulations, what's allowed under zoning, the Conservation Commission's wetlands bylaw, historic preservation. Nantucket has, in addition to, an amazing natural island landscape, has a very rich history. So these are all things we have to be aware of when we're proposing solutions and to sort of work within that legal framework. And then there's sort of the unique geography of Nantucket as the only town in Massachusetts that's also just an island, a town, a county, and an island that's all sort of contiguous. And so that brings with it its own concerns. Like, it's hard to live in the next town over and commute, because to commute, you have to take a ferry. It's not an easy commute. So it has its own unique like physical constraints. That goes for infrastructure concerns as well. So those are some of the challenges and barriers that you might see in the plan. So next slide. So the other main components of housing production plan, I sort of like to describe this as like a step one and a step two. So step one is this housing needs assessment that you see here. So we take a look at, what's going on in the community. What's the state of things? What are the needs currently? So we look at all sorts of demographic information, age, population growth, income, all kinds of things, tons of data, and housing characteristics, the market, the housing supply, new building permits, all, again, wide variety of data we look at. The barriers and constraints are also part of this, looking at the existing subsidized housing inventory, all that. So all that comes together to form, a cohesive picture of what this community is like. And also, of course, public feedback plays an important part in this as well, of course. And sort of get that needs assessment together, and then we go to goals. So the goals follow from the needs. Any particular demographic or housing trends we notice there get translated into, okay, these are the goals to meet the needs implied by that information we just analyzed. So some of these goals are mandated by the state to be included in a housing production plan. We have to have that specific yearly number. That's an important goal. For Nantucket, it's about 24. You need to talk about, what types of development you're going to do. Like we might recommend, for example, like an infill strategy, developing in already developed areas. That could be a potential suggestion. So we lay out, the set of goals where we want to get to, and then we develop strategies for meeting those goals. So it sort of goes needs, goals, strategies. And there's a wide variety of strategies we might recommend. Again, we're still in the early stages of this plan, so we don't know yet exactly which strategies we're going to be recommending for Nantucket. But that's the ultimate. The sort of end product is a set of strategies for the town to consider going forward to meet their affordable housing needs. And this is sort of just like a summary of the types of things that the state wants to see on there. So the specific strategies we develop will, answer what the state wants to know from a housing production plan, but also really meet the local needs that we find. So I believe that's the last slide of this section. Yes. So hopefully that gave you a good sense of what the actual project is we're doing. If you still have any questions about anything I explained, of course, the chat is open, as Jen has explained, and I'm going to turn it back over to her for this next section. Take it away,
Yeah,
Jen.
great. Thanks, Tyler. I love your presentations.
Thanks.
All right, he's on mute now, but I think he's saying thanks. Okay, good. So I'm going to just go over now the engagement, what you can expect as part of this process. But if there are any slides that you want us to go back to, or if you have any questions, just let us know. So in terms of the schedule of engagement, this is sort of the schedule starting back in early October when we kicked off the project. And since then, we've launched the housing survey, which is live starting today. And we're going to give you a link for that online housing survey in, I think, the next slide. And then we're having the webinar tonight, of course, and this is really just an overview and then starting to get your input before we get too far in the process. We're also going to be having a series of focus groups over the next few weeks. And then sorry, I'm just looking at the dates here. We have a few housing trust meetings you can see sort of scattered in to sort of review milestones and the progress we make. But then the next webinar, there's going to be a second webinar, and it's currently scheduled for March 23rd. So hopefully you can also come to that. It'll be totally different than tonight. We might, or then this afternoon, whatever time of day it is. We may go through some of the basics just because sometimes people come and they haven't been part of the process earlier on. So that's, usually we'll go through some of the basics, but then we'll really focus in at the next webinar. What are some of the preliminary strategies? What have we heard through the engagement process? What did we hear from the community at the first webinar? What did we hear from the focus groups? What did we hear from responses to the community survey? And we'll share all that with participants. Hopefully you'll come at the March webinar. And then we'll also share some ideas, some preliminary ideas for strategies and get some feedback on, Do you think these are good strategies or not to include in the plan? And that will really help the project team refine what is put in the plan. And then the plan will be written essentially after that second webinar, after we get that community feedback on the draft strategies. We'll want to write the plan, and then it will be put out again for public comment and go through a kind of a more traditional process that you're probably used to, where the planning board and select board will have public meetings and review the plan and obtain citizen comments that way. So that's what you can expect. And I see a long thing here. I don't know, Tucker, or sorry, Tucker or Tyler, if you could just let me know if we should be answering that now on the chat, but I'm going to keep going just in case it's not something we need to answer at this moment. So how can you be part of the discussion? So there's tonight's webinar. Here's the link to the survey, the second bullet here. So it's just, www.surveymonkey.com/r/Nantucket HPP. And we'll make this slide deck available. I'm sure the town can put it up on the trust website. If you want to, this is a hyperlink you can have. And then the town's also going to be circulating this link, and you'll probably get it anyway, but that's the link for the survey. It is live now, and we are translating it into a couple of different languages. And that will be ready, I think, by the end of this week. Barry, actually, I don't know if you could just jump on real quick and just, or Tucker, I can't remember the exact timing of when the translations will be available. I don't want to commit to the end of this week if that's not actually the timing. So if I misspoke, just someone correct me, but I believe the idea is that the translated versions will be ready in in the next few days by the end of the week. And
That's
I think
correct.
there's 2 translated. Okay, thank you. And I think they're doing Spanish and also Portuguese. Okay, good. And then the second webinar I talked about, hope you can come to that. And then the draft plan will be released maybe in April, but I said May just in case, depending on how much process there is around reviewing it before it's released for public review. And then throughout I put this under the draft plan for public comments, but really throughout the process, if you have any questions or comments or want to offer other, suggestions, you can always email Tucker, and here's his email here, tholland@nantucket-ma.gov. And then at the end, towards the end of the process, after the draft plan is written and released for public comment, then there'll be a public presentation before the select board and planning board, and that will be another chance to participate in the process. Okay, so that's really the full presentation. That's kind of the canned presentation. But now what we'd like to do is just start to get you to respond to some of these discussion questions and also ask any other questions you want. And we have a number of people on here as panelists. So if Tyler or I can't answer your question, it's possible that Tucker or one of the board of trustees members could help to answer questions. But the prompt questions that I have are very general. And you can write these right into the chat. And again, this is all part of the public record. We'll be collecting everything you write. Number 1, what do you think are the most pressing housing issues on Nantucket? And when you answer these questions, if you could, sorry, my email just popped up on me for some reason. Okay. If you could, it's annoying, it keeps doing it. If you could just put the number of the question you're answering in the chat, that will help me so that I don't, we don't think that you're saying something's an issue and we look at like, oh, that's a strength. So just put if you're answering question number 1, 2, 3, or 4. So number 1 is, what do you think are the most pressing issues? 2 is, what do you think are the greatest strengths or opportunities? 3, what do you think are the greatest obstacles? You could identify that as issue 2. You could, they're kind of similar, but what do you think are the greatest obstacles? And then 4, what are the priorities that you hope this plan can help the town address? And the plan, again, as Tyler had mentioned before, is a 5-year plan. So just sort of think, realistically in that time frame, what kinds of suggestions could this plan, potentially consider? And it's really nice to mine for ideas early in the process. So as Tyler said, we're going through this big analysis right now. We can keep those ideas sort of in the back of our minds as we're looking at the data and the development constraints, and start to think about, this strategy was mentioned. I wonder if that's something that's feasible or realistic on the island. So this is the whole program. And so I'd love for you to start chatting here. I don't actually see any answers yet unless they're on the Q&A, which I'm going to pull up right now. Okay. So the one Q&A that I see here is, what do you do to qualify for rental units? And it looks like Brooke is actually answering that. And I'm not actually sure what the nature of this question is, the kind of the context of the question. Brooke, you can always kind of chime in if you, yeah.
Jen, I was just going to mention, I answered a couple other questions leading up to that about whether existing units and could count towards the subsidized housing inventory. And so she was asking how the process for certifying one of those existing rental units.
Oh, okay, got it. Okay, good. So there's already some answered questions here. That's terrific. Good. Okay, so someone's answered to question number 1, lack of enforcement of substandard housing. I have a few more answers here. I have having affordable and desirable housing options for year-round workers on the island. Someone else says to question number 1, the most pressing issue is homelessness. Someone else says affordable options to prevent overcrowding. And then we have someone answering here about a strength is diversity. An obstacle is the resistance to change and racism. The HPP can identify how many of what kind we need. Mm-hmm. Someone else here, number 3, to meet the state criteria, we need to have 24 affordable houses on the island. Isn't that number low? Oh, okay, I see. Let's see, at 4 houses, we need 20 to 75 to 100 houses. I'm not sure what the second part of that means, but I believe that 24 was just the annual production goal, which is just an incremental goal that's set out by the state as part of these housing production plans. So it's 0.5% of your year-round housing units. That's not all the housing that you need, but that's just what you need to meet the certification requirements of the plan. If that doesn't make sense, let me know. I know Tucker went over some of the, what does approval mean? What does certification mean? If that's not clear, just let us know. We can go over that again. All right, I have another one here, and people just chime in if you want to, any of the panelists want to add anything else. Let's see, greatest obstacle, the denial or refusal to see that homelessness and very low income people actually live here, and it hurts our image. Yeah, interesting. All right, another one here, number 1, what are the most pressing housing issues? A, lack of building lots or developable land. 2, insufficient, for answer number 2, question number 2, insufficient rental stock due to, things are going off my screen here. Insufficient rental stock due to restrictive zoning and NIMBY reactions to large, relatively dense developments. 3, the land bank has crowded out housing and artificially inflated land and housing costs. Okay, we've got another one for question number 3. One of the obstacles is making decisions based on capitalist-driven priorities, which leads to short-term gains and long-term unmet needs. Number 1, increasingly high cost of housing, lack of available and affordable housing, short-term rentals, and loss of year-round housing. Developers that buy house, knock it down, and rebuild or expand. Add a second dwelling, swimming pool and cabana, and then flip the property for a huge profit or rent short-term. So that was all part of what are some of the issues here. Okay, we've got number 3. Answer to number 3, priorities get the real numbers of people in need. Yeah. I mean, it's difficult. I think that, Tyler, I don't know if you want to kind of address what goes into the housing needs assessment and the data that we look at. I know that it's very difficult, especially with smaller geographies, to use, the data sources we use are samples essentially at this point from the American Community Survey. And with a small community like Nantucket, the margin of error is relatively wide because it's just a sample of population. So the question is, how do you make assessments? And you know, is there a way to get the real numbers of people in need? And sort of how do you look at the data knowing that there are, you know, limitations to the data, especially for small geographies like this?
Mhm. Yeah, that is a good question. And we're definitely aware that a lot of people on Nantucket have, you know, concerns about, you know, relative inaccuracies and counts of things like, you know, seasonal versus year-round units and things. I think we've definitely heard that. And I think the way to address it, I think what we're doing is we're really going after local engagement, especially with like a wide variety of organizations, some of which don't necessarily have anything directly to do with housing. I know we've gone over a very long list of people to talk to for you know, focus groups, but even beyond that, you know, Judy and I have been talking about, you know, how do we try to find and get in contact with populations who might not be easily counted or accessed otherwise. So we're definitely making a concerted effort to reach out to all kinds of you know, nonprofits and organizations and you know, churches and community places all throughout the island to try to make up for the fact that there may be some you know, gaps in the data. So we're definitely aware of that, and hopefully we can, you know, if the American Community Survey doesn't have the full story, then it's kind of hard to get the full story, but we're trying to fill those gaps with, you know, more qualitative data. Even if we can't come up with a nice spreadsheet of all the perfect numbers, we can at least say, you know, we talked to people on the island and here's what they say about, you know, such and such population. And so that's sort of how we're addressing it.
Yeah, great, Tyler. Thanks. That's really helpful. All right, so I've got another comment here. For question number 1, we have a 12-month-a-year problem. We fight for 9 months and then pretend this is paradise for 3 months. Second question, or response to second question, lots of invested parties. People seem to understand the need. So those are strengths. And then number 3, obstacles, racism, NIMBYism. Plenty of people benefit from inflated real estate market, the I got mine attitude. And I just realized I shouldn't assume everybody knows the term NIMBY. You know, working in this field for so long, it's like, gosh, I forgot that, you know, maybe not everybody knows that term, but it just means not in my backyard. And, it, you know, people say maybe in theory they're in favor of affordable or more housing diversity, but if it's proposed next to them, it's, you know, it's a different story. And that's, you know, common all over, at least all over the country. I imagine it's not just our country, but it's definitely not unique to Nantucket. Okay, number 3, for an obstacle, the more houses we build overall, the more affordable housing we need for people required to keep the town functional. We need to stop building so many houses overall and instead convert more of the existing houses back to affordable year-round occupancy. So really looking at the existing housing stock and how can you have strategies that, you know, look at ability to convert existing housing to affordable and year-round, of course, is key on in a community like this. All right, number 3, another answer for number 3, off-island money is plentiful and real estate is an investment class of choice. Number 3, very little land available on which to build and the cost of building. Question number 4, find strategies to retain year-round housing we already have, not just focus on developing new units. Okay, so similar actually thought to a few answers above. Let's see, question number 2, Nantucket's greatest strengths. The primary one is financial resources. We are a relatively wealthy town and can afford appropriate capital to affordable housing. Note the $25 million appropriation to the Affordable Housing Trust thus far. Question number 2, Nantucket is wealthy enough to be able to solve its problems. So two different people saying same thing, really. All right, number 2, we need to figure out how to make use of tiny houses and identify likely suspects for covenant homes. Yeah, I wonder actually, Tucker or one of the other panelists, could you just describe a little bit more about the covenant homes. I sort of know the rough kind of version, but I don't want to get any of the details wrong. So just for folks who may not be, maybe everyone else is, really already aware of covenant homes and what that means on the island.
Sure. The Covenant program administered by Housing Nantucket serves the 150% AMI household level, and it basically allows someone to subdivide their property in order to create the covenant property on a parcel that otherwise would not be subdividable in the zoning district in which it sits.
Great. That's great. And Tucker, how long
Tucker?
has it? Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Jen. Tucker, if you can just elaborate for the group that the covenant program is housing that's affordable, not affordable housing as recognized by the state under which the HPP is working towards. I may have said what I'm asking you to say, but just like that clarification.
I love a well-articulated question. You kind of said it there, Brian, that there is undeniably a need for moderate to middle income housing solutions here on Nantucket, like the Covenant program provides. Those units do not count toward the state 10% requirement. For a home ownership unit to count toward the 10% requirement, it needs to be restricted at 80% AMI or less, and Covenant again would serve 150. But this level of housing is indeed referenced in part of the housing production plan, and is important, very important here on Nantucket.
Thank you. That's great. So hopefully that's helpful to folks on the webinar here. All right, let me keep going. So the next one I see is answer to number 3. Affordable housing has gotten a lot of attention because of 40Bs, but the middle class is getting crushed and they don't typically qualify for programs, which is, what we were talking about a bit when we were talking about the Covenant program. Yeah, thank you. All right, another one to number 3, greatest obstacles. The primary one is resistance from current residents to having affordable developments sited near them. Note the resistance of the, I'm not sure I'm going to say this right, Tacoma Green project. Somebody correct me if I got it wrong. That cost the town 2 years and lots of legal fees to fight. Another one here for question number 1. We have plenty of issues like this. Housing, not the only one. Okay, that was actually on a comment above, and I'm sorry, I have so many comments coming in that I'm actually not sure what that was. It was like a footnote to another comment. All right, number 4, priorities. Reach out to underserved communities. Those diverse communities need to trust the town for this process to work. Someone offered, I would like to see the sustainability initiative of recycled structures throughout our I'm sorry, what is NHL? Is that?
National Historic Landmark.
Oh, got it. Okay. Throughout our National Historic Landmark. The town, through the HDC, Historic District Commission, would rather have structures moved. It would be nice to link that effort into the Housing Production Plan update instead of just saying, we tried. Donovan Ripkema has linked the economic benefits of historic preservation and affordable housing. It should be referenced and utilized. Okay, another answer to number 3, lack of understanding of a complex issue is a greatest obstacle. And I assume they mean kind of broad public understanding. Number 3, the high value of Nantucket homes and property lead to leveraging Nantucket properties to the max, whether the property owner lives on Nantucket or is an off-island investor, personal profit over community welfare. Number 2, greatest strengths, financial resources. So we're definitely seeing some themes here. I'm seeing some, repeat themes from multiple different people. All right, a concern, if 67% of today's participants own a home here, meaning participants on this webinar, I wonder how realistic the input is for those in need of housing. I am one of your 9%, the 4 people here today, and a 12th generation native, and feel there are many more renters out there living in possible tenuous situations. Yeah, it's a great point. And we always, one of the reasons we ask those questions is to try to figure out who is here, and when folks are contributing, we can sort of understand maybe where they're coming from, and also understand what are the voices we're not hearing from. And so part of our goal when we set up an engagement strategy is to use multiple avenues for trying to get feedback, knowing that you're not going to reach everyone from doing one online webinar, but through the course of the focus groups, as well as, I didn't even mention this, but Tyler, I think, alluded to the fact that there's focus groups as well as interviews that will happen that are targeted to stakeholders, including stakeholders that we may not hear from on something like this. In addition, the community survey, we're also hoping can be really pushed out and reaching a variety of other people who also care and have a stake in the island. And so it's a good point, and it's something we think a lot about, and we do our best to reach as many people as possible. So thank you for bringing that up. All right, answer to number 4, priorities for the HVP. A focus on rental housing. B, identifying more building lots for affordable housing. C, including employer-owned supplied housing in the affordable data gathering. I see. So really, as part of inventorying what the affordable stock is, really understand what is the extent of the employer-owned housing. And I don't want to put you on the spot, Tyler or Tucker, but I don't know to what extent do we have a relatively complete inventory of employer-owned or supplied housing on the island?
We do
Well-
not have a complete inventory of business-owned housing, employer-owned housing.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, when I was creating my slide and talking about employer provided housing in the last housing production plan from 5 years ago, there was a partial inventory of some of the major players with some unit counts, which is where I got those names from. But beyond that, I'm not sure what's out there.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right, let's see. This is the first year of the new additional 12% state tax on rentals. Is there a way that the additional state income can come back to the island, perhaps to be used for affordable housing? I assume it currently goes to the state. Seems odd that home renters get taxed so hard. I'm actually not sure. I don't, we can certainly just sort of take that and look into it, unless it's someone on the call, on the panelist, in the panel here has any kind of ready answer for this. Okay.
So I'll give a quick ready answer. A portion of the short-term rental tax stays local. If I remember correctly, it's a total of 11.7%, and 6% of it stays local to Nantucket. The selectmen, I believe, are putting that into other budget items at the moment, or it's being determined how to direct the utilization of those funds.
Okay, great. That's very helpful. Thank you. All right, next one. I'm not a homeowner, but have lived on the island since I was an infant. Oh, I'm sorry. This is an answer to somebody. All right, great. Just encouraging participate. Okay, and so I said the name wrong. Someone said it was a spelling mistake. So you caught me because I'm not from the island and I don't know all of the local names. If I was, I maybe would have known this, but it was Tacoma, I assume, is the way you say that. All right. There must be, for question number 4, there must be a balance between the extreme need for housing in general with the environmental limitations of an island, aquifer erosion, hazardous runoff, sewage, etc. This may mean not only creating affordable housing options, but limiting percentage of investment housing, housing expansion, seasonal housing. The overall economy of Nantucket can only benefit from a growing year-round population as opposed to focusing on making all the money we can during 3 months of the year. Okay, let's see. We've got another one here for number 4. Research and evaluate creative zoning alternatives that enable the town to address seasonal market pressures and use more existing housing stock and potential housing developed under existing regulations for year-round and affordable opportunities. Okay, someone asked, will the survey have open-ended answers possible or built-in answers geared toward specific results? So the survey is a combination of things. So when you, hopefully you'll take it. There are some open-ended questions that are just, fully open-ended. And there are other questions that are asking people to explain their answers to multiple choice questions. So in some of the instances you'll see we ask, I forget, Barry, you may be able to know off the top of your head which ones, but some of them will ask a multiple question, then we'll say, please explain your answer. And then a few other questions are also talking about, what is your housing situation? How would you, and what do you think are the greatest issues on the island? And those are just open-ended. The other questions really relate to your own experience of yours, and I would say your family's experience of housing on the island. And it asks you a series of questions, finds out a little bit about who you are, like, are you a year-round, resident? Are you part-time resident? Do you work on the island, etc. And then it actually will ask you things like, and I think, Barry, tell me, we went back and forth which of these questions to put in, but if you rent, are the rental prices affordable to you, and to explain that. And it asks you other things just about your housing situation, as well as, you can also get directed if we ask you, do you want to answer some questions about aging on the island? And if you answer yes, then you can be directed to some questions around aging on the island and your housing situation and the types of housing, either modifications to your own home or other housing options that you would need. So Barry, correct me if I got any of the details on that wrong. Barry really put together all the details of that survey.
No, that all sounds right to me. Yeah, there'll be options like, do you rent or own, that will send you down different paths through the survey. And then at the very end, there'll be a few demographic questions about income level and race, ethnicity, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, perfect. Good. All right. The next one is for question number two. One opportunity to address NIMBYism would be to avoid such high density housing developments to Common Green, Surfside Crossing, and spread them throughout the island and not just in one small area. And then another one, we do not have good records on employer provided housing, but it is believed to be significant, hundreds of units, and should be taken into account. All right, that's everything in the chat, I think, unless any of the panelists, if you think I missed something, I tried to go through one by one, but I didn't go back up to the top while we were presenting to see if there were any other things there. So just, chime in if you feel like I missed anything, but I did just get to the bottom of the chat. And then I think panelists have been answering the Q&A that have come in, but let me just see if there's anything else here. So one of the Q&A is an answer to number 3 about the greatest obstacles. So the greatest obstacle is high cost of real estate, and this could turn into an opportunity if the warrant article passes in June. Could somebody just tell me what that's referring to? Does anybody know?
There's a private citizen warrant article to allocate some funding of the land bank, 0.5%, towards affordable housing.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So that would make the Affordable Housing Trust a player in an expensive real estate market.
Got it. Okay. All right. And then I have another question here. Specifically, are you asking the town to expand FAR or law? This seems like it's a part of a conversation. I'm not sure. Are you asking the town to expand FAR, which means floor area ratio, or lot coverage on smaller lots with the goal of having smaller lots permitted. So I'm not sure what that's in reference to. It may be part of a conversation that had already been happening through some questions that were answered that I can't actually see right now. Let's see, we've got one. Yeah, this looks like another question that has some context, so I don't. Okay, here's one. If we remain on the SHI list, we should move. I'm not sure what this is either. I don't know, Barry, are there things that have, I'm not sure how to frame them.
The one about FAR was, I think, following up on a previous question. What changes to zoning are you recommending to reach development goals for 490 units? And Brooke mentioned that Nantucket has some of the most
I see.
flexible zoning.
Okay. Yeah, so these are really kind of follow-ups on some of the prior ones. All right, someone actually here in the chat says, I disagree with spreading housing out across the island. If we developed more village areas, which include some commercial spaces, people would be able to drive less and build stronger communities. Yeah, thank you. These are great. This is a great discussion, and I know it's, I know it's kind of awkward, right? Because we're all probably sitting in our homes or offices or what have you, and we're not together, and it's hard to actually have a conversation with each other, which is more typical in a in-person sort of event that we would normally hold, not in COVID times. But I'm glad that people are sort of commenting on the things that I'm reading out loud. We're actually getting some people sort of having discussions through me by reading these things. So I appreciate that back and forth. Okay, somebody else answered for number 2, tiny houses. So we saw, I think another reference tiny houses earlier on. Great. So are there anything else that any of the panelists, want to share, or any other comments on some of the feedback that we've gotten to date that you wanted to share? I think we're sort of running toward the end here. I think that the comments are slowing down, so I think we could probably wrap up, but I just wanted to give the other panelists the opportunity to say anything else you'd like to regarding the comments that have come in already.
Thank you very much, Jen. Reading some of these comments, I wish I could give everyone a magic wand. Would love to be able to enact much of what's come in. Reading some of the comments, so I think it speaks to the observation that someone made earlier, just how complex the issue is, and how how much work there is to do in terms of educating folks. So hopefully today has been helpful in that regard. And the trust members, I mean, we're very fortunate to have the folks who serve on this board. It is an extremely dedicated board, and Nantucket is making good progress. It's not easy, but as has also been pointed out here, I mean, we have the ability to solve this problem. It really is a matter of will. We have the resources available to us. We are just very grateful for everyone, everyone who's been involved today, their questions, the answers that are provided. And we hope that folks will continue to stay involved. That is key. We're all in this together. So I just wanted to say thank you also to Jen and Tyler for this discussion. I think it's been very informative.
I think maybe Brooke, did you want to say something?
Yes, I just wanted to invite people who are participating today. The Affordable Housing Trust meetings are open to the public and are recorded and available on YouTube. So if your curiosity has been spiked and you want to learn more, or join us in hearing about the things that we are working on, I encourage everybody to come. Our regular meetings are the 3rd Tuesday of each month at 1 p.m. And we've also been recently we've been adding a second meeting the 1st Tuesday of the month because we're very, very busy. And so I encourage everybody to come to our meetings and listen and comment and give us your feedback. We are open to hearing from you anytime.
Great. All right.
If
Well,
I-
with that, I was
just
right.
gonna-
You have to adjourn.
Yeah, thank you. I also just wanted to echo the comments made by Tucker and Brooke, and I'm very appreciative of where we were 5 years ago, and there wasn't this much public participation as we began the HPP process. So I'm very enthusiastic about all of the people that are on today. So thank you for joining, and next time bring a friend too. So if there's nothing else that you would like to add, Jen, is there anything that you?
No, I'm all set. And I just wanted to echo the thanks. And it's, really great when people spend time, participating in this kind of event for the future of their community, really. So thank you all for coming.
So this is Brooke, and I would offer a motion for adjournment if someone from the trust wants to second that.
Second, this is Rima.
Thank you, Rima. And by a matter of roll call, let me just figure out how to get that screen back up. Brooke Moore?
Aye.
Dave Iverson?
Aye.
Who's next? Christy Ferrantella?
Aye.
Rima Sherry?
Aye.
Allison Mitchell?
Aye.
And Brian Sullivan? Aye. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Very, very good stuff. Good information.
Well done, you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jen. Great job, as well as Tyler. Thank you.